with the Epstein uproar continuing, new details today that undercut White House claims as well as fueling more questions. NBC News reporting top officials did huddle last night specifically to discuss the Epstein scandal and what they will do about ongoing questions and transparency, something that VP Vance basically all but denied yesterday. Maybe Trump officials are rattled. Maybe they don't have one story to tell. The meeting followed that messaging from the president, who handed the mic to Vice President Vance, who said they weren't going to be doing that kind of meeting, called that fake news. But the reporting says that Attorney General Bondi and FBI Director Patel were there, and that this occurred different than some of the initial reports, ultimately at the White House. Now, if the location changed, but the topics and meeting participants stayed the same, it looks like basically the core point of the early reporting that they were so quick to deny, that there was a kind of high-level emergency Epstein meeting, still happened. Now, here's Vance and Trump, as mentioned.
It's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation, and I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country, and that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit.
The president there, who has increasingly sounded disinhibited in this second term, swearing in public, not something we usually see from presidents, but more important than the rhetoric are the underlying facts, that contrary to the denials, there is evidence and reporting, there is a meeting, that contrary to the initial claims that Donald Trump and his team would bring transparency to the Epstein case, the Epstein files, as we've heard them called, no transparency at all. And MAGA leaders, among others, saying it's a cover-up. And despite the denial, the report suggests that the strategy meeting at Vance's residence was basically canceled in response to the reporting about it. So again, they are trying to do certain things while not getting caught doing those things, and they are willing to change locations or perhaps other details for the optics. But the story goes well beyond optics, with reporting that casts doubt about Trump's denials and the way that he has tried to defend whatever his history is with Epstein. He had recently claimed to have banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago in 2000. Aides said that he did ban the now deceased sex trafficker, but it was later in 2004. But a New York Post article stokes different questions, because it was in 2007 that outlet, a tabloid that has long covered Donald Trump, far, far longer than he was in politics, noted that Epstein denies he's banned from Mar-a-Lago and says, in fact, he was recently invited to an event there. Now, that doesn't squash or end the matter, because it may be that Epstein was trying to get out from under the perception that he's banned. And of course, you could be banned from somewhere and still have someone invite you there, not knowing you're banned. So a lot of that just feeds, again, the questions about why it's so hard for everyone involved in their history to explain exactly what it was and when it ended. New heat on Trump, meanwhile, from MAGA, as we've been telling you. Trump has all but kept the door open to pardoning the only living Epstein conspirator in prison, Ms. Maxwell. Far-right podcaster Candace Owens responding thusly.
Don't even act surprised when he pardons Ghislaine Maxwell. That would just be foolish of you, foolish of me, to think that he's not going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, okay? Trump is implicated by his sheer deceit right now in this moment. He is being so deceitful. It's incredible.
Trump officials scrambling to get their story straight. MAGA voices, who have been loyal on many other issues and controversies, have now made it clear week after week, this one is different. They will not go along with the spin or outright lies, some call it. Gaslighting, Joe Rogan call it. The heat from MAGA is a reminder that a president who has at times had an almost cult-like loyalty, which many politicians would like, is finding limits on it early in the second term. With that in mind, we turn to a guest well-versed on exactly these issues. Sarah Matthews served as Trump White House Deputy Press Secretary, currently serves working with the Home of the Brave PAC, but also has distanced herself from Donald Trump from Jan 6 on. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me on again.
What do you see specifically in a MAGA revolt that will not quiet as Donald Trump betrays or breaks many of the vows that he and others made about transparency, at least in this case?
Yeah, this is something that Donald Trump campaigned on. He said that when he was put back in office that he would release this list. And it wasn't just him, it was many of these administration officials as well. You look at folks like Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, they were out there saying the same thing, that they wanted to see transparency when it came to Jeffrey Epstein. And all of a sudden, they seem to have changed their tune. You obviously know that Pam Bondi initially had all these right-wing influencers come to the White House, and they gave them these binders of phase one of releasing the Epstein files. And then all of a sudden, the White House no longer wants to talk about it. Donald Trump keeps saying that this is a hoax. He's saying that using colorful language to describe it, as you noted as well at the top of the program. And it just begs the question, what are they trying to cover up? Because they either have to admit that they lied to their voters about there being a list, or they need to acknowledge that they're part of the cover up when it comes to this. And it's not only a slap in the face to their voters when they campaigned on this, more importantly, it's a slap in the face to the victims who really deserve answers and transparency on this issue.
Let's take a listen to Congresswoman Mace, how she's trying to play this.
Most of the voters that I talk to want to see the files released. I mean, that's what I've heard all across South Carolina.
But they're blaming the president's administration, Bondi, for not being transparent enough. Do you understand why they feel that way?
Well, I know that the president has asked for files to be released, like the transcript from the grand jury. He asked for those files to come out and be released, and I guess the judge blocked it.
Sarah, we've seen some elected Republicans do that dance while the base and the sort of podcasters and new media folks who are clearly not as one note as, say, Fox News, are taking a different tune. Given that you yourself have spoken out against Donald Trump, while you obviously worked for him for some reasons, you drew a line and then experienced sort of the backlash that can come from that on the right or with MAGA. What do you think of this type of revolt, and how does it play inside the White House, given your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, this definitely is difficult for Republicans to manage. Obviously, with anything with Donald Trump, they're constantly towing a line and trying to appease him. But with this issue in particular, we're seeing that it's sticking around. It's not going away. Obviously, we've been talking about it in the news for weeks. And so this isn't something that I feel like these elected officials can just ignore or brush off because they know that their constituents want answers. And especially when you're coming from some of those more deep red districts, I think, or deep red states, they know that their constituents in particular really care about this issue. And so they can't just brush it off, even though obviously the White House would love for them to do that. But I think it makes it even more difficult for someone, not just like a Nancy Mace, but you look at Speaker Mike Johnson and how he's had to navigate this. He literally sent his office and everyone out of DC for the summer already and started the August recess early because he doesn't want to be talking about this issue and he's just hoping that it will go away.
Do you think that basically this whole approach, you're talking about make it go away, run out the clock, do you think there's any risk that sort of they lose people in a more fundamental way? We talked this week about how George Bush withstood many scandals and criticisms, but ultimately he had a Katrina moment. He never rebounded from it. Do you think Epstein could grow that large, or is that sort of misunderstanding the way this movement works, one you know about?
I think with any controversy with Donald Trump, it always appears like he's Teflon. Nothing is able to stick, and the news cycle quickly changes, and he's able to bounce right back from any controversy I've ever witnessed with him. But this seems to be like the one that might have some sticking power. And I think it's because his MAGA base cares so deeply about this issue and he's trying to gaslight them. And I think that they're actually seeing through the lies and the distractions that him and the administration are pushing. And so it doesn't matter how many backroom, war room strategy type of meetings that this White House and the DOJ and the FBI are going to have on how to combat this. I think that the voters and the American people are demanding transparency and answers on this. And it does seem to really have riled up the base. As you noted with the podcaster types of Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, they're talking about this issue too. And a lot of those newer voters that came into the coalition for Trump who voted for him in 2024, they aren't as loyal maybe as some of the OG MAGA base. And so I think that a lot of those voters are going to be really, really upset. And that's not exactly what you want as we go into the midterm election cycle, that this is what we're talking about, that we're talking about Epstein. And it does just appear like there is a cover up happening from the administration.